Anybody who's trying to change things, trying to transform things, and in a way it comes back to empathy, but having empathy for the person that doesn't understand what you're talking about, that is uncomfortable with change. You know, I've been called a chocolate teapot and stuff like that loads of times, and I just fought that. But I think putting yourself in other people's shoes is fundamental to thinking about your customers, but it's also fundamental to think about other leaders or other people that you might be managing and taking them on the journey. Most failures are people going off piste, people saying this is rubbish, I haven't talked to them enough, I haven't explained what we're doing, I haven't, given them the intellectual hug to make sure they really get it. And the minute you're out.
Welcome to Team Talk. I'm delighted to have Clive Grinyer with me today. Welcome, Clive.
Hello, thank you very much for inviting me.
My absolute pleasure. It's really wonderful to have you on. I know that you're internationally known pioneer and evangelist for design. I absolutely love that title. If you don't know Clive, he is a famous founder of a wonderful design company called Tangerine. He's gone on to stuff that is far more educational. You were the head of the design innovation and UK Council. And then I believe you went on to the Royal Court of the Royal College of Art to set up design service skills there. And you're still doing a lot in the educational space today. Is that right, Clive? Anything I've missed?
More than ever through the courses with S2 Global and my own company now and next. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And that real love and passion for design comes through, I think, very strongly in everything I've experienced. And I know, look, a number of people into design are going to tune in to listen to you, Clive.
Okay.
This is more focused on leaders developing their team, particularly SMEs. So some people might be thinking, well, what on earth is design got to do with leadership development? So, what's your thoughts on that, Clive? Let's just kick off there.
Right, where do I start? Good question. And I spent most of my life turning up in various leadership positions or talking to leaders of businesses, brand new, small or large, who wonder what on earth I'm doing there.
Right.
And that's a reasonable, point of view. We're taught very much in sort of MBA language, business language. It's all about economics and capability of our organizations. And unfortunately, design has a slightly negative perspective or perception, rather, in people. And I often kick off my talks with the picture of a pink handbag saying, I bet that's what you think we do. Because it is. Very often, design is seen as something that's decorative or luxury items or something to do with gardens and interior design. I think there's quite a large amount of the world now realizing that design is a much more fundamental strategic tool for businesses than they did. And there's lots of examples of that. Digital design. We wouldn't have an ugly app anymore. We wouldn't create an app or website that was unusable. But there was a time when that was the case. And designers have revolutionized those sorts of touch points. We buy cars because they're brilliantly designed. We don't buy cars that are not brilliantly designed. And all that thinking and activity is now right into business and any organization, to be honest. So I think if we see design as a process, methods, ways of thinking, especially about our customers and the people who use our services, then we began to see the gap in our leadership knowledge, the gap in our organization that designers fill or can fill. Lovely.
And I love the word you said there, seeing design as a way of thinking. Because this may be deeply offensive to you, but on one hand, it doesn't matter if somebody thinks design is all about just the design team within the Department of Business. That's okay, but if somebody think it is far broader and far more all-encompassing, and I know you're in that space, then that's okay. Well, it's okay from my perspective, because what I want to hopefully engender and you to share is some of that thinking process that any leader can really learn and develop from. Is that okay?
That's very okay. And especially when I started as a product designer, I could see that there were so many decisions that were made in the business that meant I couldn't really help them. They'd already screwed up. you know so helping designers, not all designers are ready to go on the journey, but help designers think more about business objectives and help businesses understand that design is a really fundamental tool they're not necessarily exploiting well enough. So absolutely, I'm happy to do that, James.
You talk about putting the human at the heart of the process. Could you just elaborate on that a bit for us?
Well, yes. I mean, at one level, the most obvious definition of humans is customers.
Yeah.
And I've worked for loads of organisations who tell me they're customer centric, and I can guarantee they are not.
Okay, you don't need to name them.
Well, quite. I very much doubt you've even met a customer. We sometimes isolate our knowledge of customers to, I don't know, the marketing department. So, oh, yes, they know our customers. No, they don't, actually. They haven't sat down and talked to them and found out what they really want to do. They're trying to sell your product or your service. So I think one of the most fundamentally different missing things in this conversation is actually understanding who customers are. And when we take people like you, James, as we will do in this process, you will discover things about your customers you never knew and you weren't curious enough to ask, frankly. And there lies in that insight of what customers really do and really want and how they are, is the fuel of innovation. It's the fuel of competitive differentiation. It's the fuel of creating something people want. And it's the jigsaw piece that's missing from our financial efforts and our organizational efforts to make a business run well. We are very deficit. And there is a great deficit in actually thinking about the customers we are designing for. I don't understand it, but it's absolutely true. People just do not think about it. It's not talk at business school, etc.
I guess the obvious question is, why not? You've come across loads of businesses that you've come in and they're clearly not doing it. Why not? Why are people not thinking about the people that they're trying to create value for?
I think sometimes they're frightened to hear the truth. They're frightened to hear what the customer really thinks. I mean, I bet every organisation's got a complaints department who really will know what customers do. But of course, we don't only want to hear from people who've complained. We want to go out and touch people who are actually using our stuff, because then we will learn how to make it better. One of the simplest tools we have is simply go and experience your own organisation. Have you actually taken the role of a customer and understood, looked at your advertising, looked at your onboarding process, looked at what it's like when you turn your service or product on? That's usually utterly revelatory for most business leaders, and they haven't done it. They might get someone else to do the mystery shopping. So I think our education tells us that we need to be efficient and run our organizations and worry about the money and worry about things like efficiency. It doesn't teach us how to be creative and how to listen to people in order that we can create better products and services. For some reason, it just doesn't happen. When I teach people like you, James, and we all sit down and start doing it, people are amazed. People are amazed at what they find out just walking through it themselves, let alone even going and talking to their customers. So I think it's just something that for some reason, fear, over too much energy on the things you think are important, but we therefore work in a very unbalanced way. We need to balance that up with that humanity of why we're doing it, what's the benefit, what's the value for customers.
What's really important, yeah. How would you, because we've talked, we haven't mentioned the word, but how would you explain is service design, is that different to just design?
I know.
What is service design?
It's very annoying because virtually nobody knows what service design is, but there's a growing number of people who do, and that means, do we change the name? What do we mean? Is it customer experience design? Is it organizational transformation? Is it system thinking? None of those quite cut it. But service design was initially, of course, the design of services. It was the realization, anyone living in the UK watching this knows that the service economy is much bigger now than almost any other economy.
Absolutely.
And that's really important to us. But do we sit down and design our services? No. They tend to be accidentally designed. I think it's important for me to say there's no such thing as no design. we're designing all the time when we make decisions. We're just doing it quite badly and not without considering customers, for example. So service design is the term we use for a much more holistic, strategic view of design. What's the purpose of your business? How are you going about it? What is the customer experience before they've even found you? How do people find your company? How do they value you? How do they realize you're better than everyone else in your field? And how, when you go into that company, do you have an experience that means they stay? You have a relationship with them, and that's got to be good for business. So service design is this sort of, sometimes they call it end to end, sort of beginning to end, but it never does end, view of design, in which you might have products, you might have digital interfaces, apps and webs that we associate with design. It's the idea that we orchestrate those. We design how they all fit together so they're consistent, they've got the same DNA, they've got the same tone of voice, they've got the same value. It leads to less siloed companies because everyone's working together, they collaborate better, they have a better view of who the customer is, they're happier as a result.
And some might say, surely that's common sense.
Well, common sense, not my favourite.
I'm being deliberately provocative.
Oh yeah, well done. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, yes, you'd have thought so, wouldn't you? But I think when we talk about common sense, my common sense and your common sense might be subtly different, maybe not, but someone else's common sense is often a sense of assumptions, a set of assumptions that we have, and that there lies many of the problems, I think, in businesses, that people assume their customers are a certain type of people. They assume they probably have the same taste as the CEO or the managing director. They assume they're like all your friends. It's really, service design is about challenging all those assumptions and building the evidence of what people are really like. And by the way, we're not just talking about customers, we're talking about people in your own company or people in your supply chain. All the tools work just as well for business to business opportunities and scenarios as they do for end customers. So design's often associated with consumer goods or end customers, but actually some of my favorite stories are businesses designing for other businesses to make them better. All the tools, all the thinking is the same.
Or even internally as well. So I don't know, Absolutely. Even if you were a lead and you had a team of 50 people and you wanted to understand the customers, i.e. your team's perspective, with a view to improve things, then you could use some of the processes that are
completely
part of design.
Can. One of the best projects I did, I worked for Barclays Bank, and that's where I really developed the sort of many of the practical applications of service design that I use in my training. We did this, it failed, we did this, it worked. But we ran a lot of these tools through the contact center, the call center, because they were the source of an enormous number of customer complaints. And when we understood their personalities, their attributes, their archetypes, and we looked at their journey at work, we realized it wasn't so surprising they were horrible to the customers. We redesigned their workplace and helped them understand who their customers were, actually. And complaints disappeared overnight, and our NPS score went up, and we had a massive impact on the end customer by designing our own internal workforce. I think it can be really impactful.
What was one practical thing if you were thinking, well, maybe I need to do that with my team? What's a practical thing a leader could do tomorrow?
Well, I think two things, and they're actually the things we did with that contact center. One is if you understand who your customer is, you've got data, and perhaps you have done some research with them, you've talked to them, you understand who they are, maybe you understand the different types, and we create things called personas. I think personas, they can be less impactful if they're out of date and they're just generic stereotype. But if they really capture your customer in a way that helps people see them and feel for them, sharing those can be very powerful. Everyone in the company understanding who the customer is based on evidence. And then we call it service safari sometimes, getting everybody, your managers, everybody, to walk through, as I was saying earlier, your own experience. What does it feel like to be a customer? Put yourself in their shoes and go through it. We often find a tremendous awareness suddenly of where there are pain points, where there are things that really could be better. I was teaching this morning, funnily enough, to quite a big company. And at the end of it, they said, why have we put up with doing things the same way when we know they don't work? It's like, well, quite. Why haven't you done that? These very simple tools, expose that, and I think give people hope. Then they become creative. Everyone is actually creative, and that's another aspect of this. Use your creativity, your knowledge of your organization to create pragmatic solutions that make better solutions so everybody's happier. It's not rocket science, but it is tremendously effective. These tools just help people see the world a bit differently and work together to make it better.
Yeah, it's really powerful. Some of these people just got to make the time to do some of these seemingly, let's not make assumptions, myself, seemingly obvious things.
I think they are obvious, but they don't do it. And you're right. One of the problems we have with design, and even calling it design can be problematic, is that we're asking people to invest a little bit of time before they do what they normally do, which is see a problem, think, oh, I'm very clever, I know the solution, rush off at great speed. But we saw this again at the Design Council when we did the research around how to develop a design process. People solutionize far too quickly. They don't understand the problem. And it costs you 100 times more to fix a problem after you've built something than if you actually spent a little bit of time understanding it before you designed and built it. People are very reticent to do that, though. They're very reticent to pause. We always feel speed is of the essence. We can't waste time talking to customers. But you will waste an enormous amount of time when you make a mistake and you realize nobody wants your glorious invention or your lovely solution because you didn't understand the problem. And that happens again and again and again. And people seem to be very slow to learn, which I think is a definition of madness, isn't it? If you do the same thing again.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, you remind me,
I see it everywhere.
More pace, more pace, less speed, almost.
Yeah, but I think this design process, service design process, and the tools we teach, call them what you want, I don't care. But they actually de-risk what you're doing because you're just asking us a few questions, getting a bit of information and data, understanding who you're designing for, looking at the root cause of a problem. We see again, so many people will push the bubble in the carpet down for another one to pop up somewhere else. I'm sure everyone's familiar with that. So this is about standing back and making sure you're really going to solve that and you don't have to constantly be fixing it. And that is very expensive. I hear so many stories of fast, agile development projects where they don't talk to customers and they then spend 6 months with 6 developers, was a story I heard recently, to fix all the problems at great expense and lost revenue. Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you invest a little bit of time to make sure that does not happen? That's my plea to everybody.
There's plenty of good examples, aren't there, that support what you say? Because there's lots of businesses fail because they stop to look at what the customer is really doing or where the market is going next. They might be too busy tweaking the Walkman when someone else is launching, MP3.
Yes, absolutely. A good example. If I think of startups are always, founded by quite strong-minded people with a big idea, and you can't challenge them on it. And my students used to work with MBA students, and they'd come back saying they only had one idea, they wouldn't be challenged by it. So it's very difficult for startups. They seem very reticent to think more broadly. They very rarely think of customers at all. They're so focused. SMEs, often feel they haven't got time. They're too busy. They're reacting all the time to stand back and do something properly new or fix something that's broken. And big businesses just have this huge sort of legacy and culture and attitude that it's just too scary and too easy to just keep doing the same thing and too scary to do something new. So maybe high up leadership pushes that. Sometimes consultants come in, and I've heard big consultants go in, massively transform a failing company. They go back 6 months later and they've had what they call organ rejection. They all go back to the old ways, and that's horrendous. It's going to cost their jobs probably. So we have to try and help people accept change a lot better, actually, and be part of that change, not have change just thrust upon you. That's why I use collaboration, the word collaboration, so much, bringing the organization together to understand customers and what their real purpose is and where their value is.
Going back to what you were saying there about startups, it's actually really natural for us as humans to sort of latch on to the first idea that we've had. And I guess over time, the more we focus, the more the more we're embedded to it. Is there any way that you can counter that natural phenomenon?
Completely understand that. And there's an awful lot of things in service design that do seem counterintuitive. For example, I tell people to make the advert first. They say, what are you talking about? And I say, no, if you have an idea, make the advert that you want to see on the Tube or in The Economist or whatever it is, and get some feedback. Do people understand what it is? Do they want it? Does it fulfill a need they have? If it doesn't, think again. Don't put all your efforts for the next few years and all that money into something people don't want. Now, of course, you'll say to me, because you're interestingly provocative, what about the Walkman? Nobody said they wanted it. And true, fair point. The world goes, but too many people don't allow themselves to be challenged at the beginning of the process. And people, when you're doing a startup, you have to be good at pitching your idea. You have to be an evangelist. But very early on, if we could only help people say, well, let's just think of a few ideas that might solve this. And tools like prototyping, that's a big design tool. Cheap, low-cost prototyping. Stick it on a fake website. Create a fake app. There's so many ways of testing your ideas that cost you nothing and hardly take any time. And they will de-risk your idea, or you'll see where the barriers are or where the risk to adoption might lie way before you build it. So I do plead with everybody to be more creative. Now, it happens in big companies as well. When the CEO has an idea, they will run from one end of the pitch to the other, pushing everyone away like a rugby player until they try at the other end, and they turn around, there's nobody with them, nobody wants their damn score anyway. So, and I've seen that happen in big businesses as well. We have to learn as humans to challenge ourselves, to allow other people to share our ideas early, and be happy that some parts of it might not be right. And that's why we say fail early. We don't literally mean go and have a failure. We mean do the learning early when nobody's going to be hurt. Yeah. Quit prototyping, quit piloting, understand where the barriers, even on a brilliant idea, might be, because so many innovations fail, not because they're not good ideas, because they haven't think about how people will understand them and adopt them and use them in a way that suits them.
That's a really good tip, because it's so easy to put something up on a website and say, would you like this, even if you haven't built it yet.
Exactly.
And I think it's also quite economically astute. I think Tesla did something quite similar, didn't it? So they launch something, they show people a picture of it, and they get people to pay deposit up front, and then they can go to the bank and say, that's exactly 500 people already want to buy it.
That's exactly right. And, and they made a lot of changes after that as well, and they also changed the price. So a lot of those people couldn't afford it when it came out, but that didn't matter.
Okay.
Because, they were testing their proposition. And I sometimes say design's as close as you can get to a crystal ball, because you can actually mimic, the future quite closely. You can make people believe that there's a car. You can make people believe that your service is there, and you can stick it out there and say, what do you think? And you might get 150 people that you can then put on a user board, and you can ask them questions, and they'll help you get it right. So it's incredibly useful. You're absolutely right. But as humans, our concepts of leadership are, I've had an idea. That's it. I'm going to march forward and not be challenged and not change my mind. That's strength. I think that's not strength. I think that's stupidity.
Absolutely. So when I was reading through the kind of the draft of your new book, 'cause you've got a new book coming out soon, one of the things that struck me, apologies if I get this wrong, was quite a simple design formula that almost took human needs, took economic reality, and took technological capability, and considered those. Well, first of all, is that right? Perhaps you could explain it properly.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, there was a diagram around for maybe 30 or 40 years. And then the design consultancy IDEO, who are well known in the design world, innovation company, actually started from the UK, but based in San Francisco and now quite global. Their now chairman, Tim Brown, wrote this book 20 years ago, Change by Design, and it was the beginning of design thinking. And he articulated what this diagram said. And I think it's been very useful for us since then. Though I think it's subtly changed recently. But version 1 of that diagram is you can't have a business unless you've got a business model that's going to pay everybody, going to pay your suppliers, going to allow you to develop whatever it is, product or service you've got. You've got to have business viability. That's why accountants are always there in the business, always calling the shots. You've got to have, yes, it was called technology. Feasibility, I think, is a better word.
Right.
Because feasibility, does your organization have the capability to deliver what it's selling, right? Simple, really. But that means all sorts of things. Have you got enough people? Have they got the right skills? Have you got the right talent right across all the different departments? Are you able to make something that matches the value that you're trying to sell it for? But then when we say value, there's a third person, the customer, the human. All that stuff is useless. You can have a brilliant organization and a brilliant business model, but does anybody want it? Does it provide value for them? Are they able to afford it, and does it match their needs? So it's really obvious to me, and I think obvious, hopefully, when I explain that sort of, you've got to have a Venn diagram, haven't you, with a bit in the middle.
Yeah,
and what we say,
absolutely.
the reason we talk about design is understood as how we design something to be attractive. And we're designing services, or we're designing whatever it is, to combine that feasibility. Can you make it? Do you have the talent? With the economic viable business model with customers' needs. And to me, it's impossible to imagine them disconnected, So what you have is businesses who are really good at business modeling and economic side, financial side. And you often have businesses that are very focused on their organizational abilities and capabilities, and perhaps they're buying more tech and IT and everything. But often they're really bad at actually going out there and talking to customers and checking that matches. And that's a risk. That's a big risk, as we were starting on this conversation, a risk that, is risky. So what we're saying there is it's getting that balance. You need people in the organization. You need a culture of thinking about the customer. It takes a bit more effort than we currently use. You definitely need to talk to them. You need to listen to them and understand. Maybe you need to share some of your early ideas with them. You need to please them. And it's not just in the single product. It's over time. How do they find you? Do you deliver on the promise? Do you keep delivering and make sure it's easy to use right across time? Those are the sort of magic ingredients. I just quickly cover, there's been a few shifts here. So business models are changing because of things like sustainability and purpose-led businesses. There's a lot more businesses who are saying, yeah, we want to make money, but we want to make money because we believe in something, and we want to make sure, for example, we're not damaging the earth, or we have some bigger role. We stand for something. That's happening a lot in business. Technology is no longer about, does the technology work, or do we have the capability? Technology specifically can be about ethics. We talk a lot about supply chain provenance. Are you getting it from the right place? What are the conditions down the supply chain? Because they can come and bite you if they're not good, right? Your reputational damage. There's a bit of complexity about that now. And then actually, we were always very focused on users. And now I think we're looking at more, general human societal benefit of what you do. I worked on an electric vehicle charging project, which was great for the electric vehicle charging owners on the street. But for the people that didn't have cars or electric vehicles, it kind of ruined their street. So we actually have to think of people who aren't even users, but are living in the ecosystem around what our business is delivering.
Yeah, no, really, really important point.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
You mentioned there in passing having the right sort of customer-focused culture across the whole team. I'm sure you've seen bad, but where have you seen good? What does a good leader engender to make that best it can be?
Yes, I have seen some good, I'm glad to say, though I've seen a lot more bad.
Okay, well, we can learn from bad as good. We're not necessarily naming people, but
I think you asked the right question. So I'm actually thinking of a few people in a particular sector, which might be surprising for people, but actually social housing. So there was a big revolution in social housing over the last 20 years, and all the councils sold off their housing to often startups, actually, well-meaning startups with a real sense of purpose. And quite a few of them made an absolute balls up of it in the first few years. But I've worked for a few now who really, they realise they're not good at communicating to residents. They realise they're not showing empathy. And we need to talk about empathy in a minute, because I think that's the fundamental ingredient that helps an organization come together. But they realize, to reduce complaints, to make their residents happy, because that's part of their purpose. Yes, put a roof over their head. They have to do lots of things. They have to upgrade their housing and look after people often and help social services. It's a complicated business, and they were failing at it. By using actually all the techniques that I'm sharing with you, they really built great empathy with all the different types of residents they have. And we can be talking about thousands and tens of thousands of residents in big districts of the company. They began to learn how to listen to them better, how to phrase their communications to them better, how to serve them better. And then when they did need to disrupt their lives, when they changed their energy system or whatever it was much easier. It was much more considered. They reduced that pressure. They were all happier as a result. They weren't getting bombarded by angry people. People like Believe Housing up in Durham, they're somebody I quote in the book. I think they've done an absolutely amazing job. They always had the sense of purpose, but now they've worked out how to actually deliver a great service. Now, are there other businesses out there? Not that many, I have to say, not that many. But, you can point to the really big ones like Amazon, love them or hate them. They actually are incredibly customer centric. And even people like Tesco, I'm fascinated by how Tesco have taken on their own delivery service, not using Deliveroo. They now got complete control over the whole experience, from clicking on your grocery basket to delivering the goods to your house. They've created this brand, Whoosh. Shows me that they're really bothered about getting it right and not having a part of the experience that goes down, because we all know it's the bit that goes down that builds your feeling about what that brand is, destroys their reputation, even if the rest of it is brilliant. So, it's about designing and then controlling that experience to make sure you deliver it really consistently.
It's really coming to me that this read across between the whole design process and a good leader running their team, because as you were describing that, you could have been just describing a good leader with empathy, really listening to his team, motivating them. It's the same thing, isn't it?
Do you know, you're absolutely right, though. We've all worked for places where that wasn't the case. And it's still occasionally, not even occasionally, there's two aspects to this. There are leaders who think they have to just be strong, and get it my way, as I was explaining earlier on. And actually, there are people who expect leaders to be strong. There are people who are much happier when people are told precisely what to do. But I don't think that's good for an organization. I completely agree with you, James. I think leaders who are empathetic to their customers, to their own people, who listen to them, who make reasoned, considered decisions. I mean, once you made a decision, obviously that's what you need a leader for. But empowering and enabling, all those great words about the people in you. And, one of the key parts of the service design process is creativity. And unleashing the creativity inside the people in an organization is hugely exciting. They'll have loads of ideas. They'll know what's going wrong. They just weren't brave enough to tell you. And
that's really important, isn't it? Because when your business gets bigger, then your communications get more important. Those baton passing moments are even more vital. And if you've got some horrible leader at the top, name no names, that everyone's scared of, they're not going to be told if the business is going in the wrong direction, are they?
And that's fantastically dangerous. It really is. And you see businesses, if we're talking about a certain person, it's the same person we're thinking of. We've just seen the destruction of their brand, haven't we? But,
there's quite a few.
There's quite a few. I think there are emerging leaders. One of the things I'm very optimistic about is actually younger people. We were talking as we came on this call about millennials and Gen Z. Millennials are getting up to become real leaders now, in 30s and 40s, whatever, and 50s. The leaders before that were very technocratic. I remember at Orange Mobile, the leaders there, the senior managers, were really, really delighted that they could do some coding. And I just thought, oh, God. Great, you can do some coding, but you don't know who your customers are. And now I think because we have generations of people who are, post Apple, post Google, post Amazon, made a real shift in our expectations, and the realization that whatever you do, you're measured against Amazon, not your competitor. every consumer,
Yeah.
everybody has an expectation that things are going to work beautifully, seamlessly, and it's why UX design has become really successful, because like I said at the beginning, you can't design a rubbish app. Your business will fail. So now you realize you have to get a UX designer. The next level up from that is actually you need a service designer to stop you making all the accidents and decisions you've made about the whole experience that were accidental and ill-considered, shall we say.
This is probably so obvious to you that you didn't mention it, Clive, but what is fundamentally for the for the average, what's the fundamental difference between a user experience and a service design process?
Well, he says, looking around for his phone, which he can't find. A user experience designer is designing through the glass, through the screen,
Right.
websites, apps, right? But that's not all of life. And any customer, even when they're using a app, how did they discover it? What was the journey they took? If I'm buying a lawnmower, or if I want to go on holiday via an app, I have to find out who makes the apps, who makes the lawnmowers, who provides the services. That's a journey that the UX designer at the moment isn't considering or isn't worried about, because they're just told to design the app. There's a lot of the process and methods are very similar, but we're standing back and we're applying those same design methods and a few more as well to what that customer journey is completely and totally, of which the app or the website is only a part of it. And that, I think, is the fundamental difference. That's why, if you're designing in the health service, sure, you've got an NHS app, and that NHS app is designed by a load of my old colleagues from Orange back in the day, who've given us an app, but we still have hospitals, we still have GPs. There's a system that app sits in. There's pharmacies. I think actually that's a great example of not yet quite right, but a rapidly developing, brilliant user experience. We know there are problems getting to see doctors and all that, but the amount of work that's gone on with service designers and great UX digital designers. The other great one, of course, is GDS, Government Digital Services, who have massively simplified getting a passport, getting a tax disc, taxing your car, all these things. And it was not the work of politicians, it was the work of designers who went in and massively simplified those processes, mostly digitally, but they still brought a service approach to it. What do we need to do? Who are we? Where are we? What's the context that app or website or whatever it is
Okay, so in simple terms, it's a far bigger picture, isn't it? So you could have the perfect app for a doctor, but if all of your patients are 90 and haven't got a phone that apps work on, is useless.
It's useless. That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. It is. It's a bigger picture. You find a lot of UX designers coming on my courses because they want to be seen as more strategic, and they also want to get more money. So that's fine.
I'm going to say this slowly for everyone else. You know exactly what it means because I've taken it from some of your inspiration. How do we make poor decisions?
So this is a chapter in my book. Yes, you are right. You are right, James. Well, I think we make poor decisions for a lot of the things I've already said. We make assumptions about the people we're designing for. We think they're like ourselves. I remember taking part in a workshop with somebody who fundamentally disagreed. It doesn't happen often, but every now and then there's someone that disagrees with what I try and teach them. And they particularly dislike the idea that we created personas of different customers, different people, to make them think differently. And this person said, I don't believe in all this rubbish. I just look at my wife and whatever she does, that's how I make my decisions. And I thought, well, that means that you are using a persona, it's just of your wife. And I don't think that really represents all your customers, right? So, people are very confident they know what they know, and they don't want to know what they don't know. So they make poor decisions because they're thinking of the wrong people. They make poor decisions because they want to go fast and they don't want to spend the time understanding what the problem is. They make poor decisions because they feel that's the right thing to do. They just have to go fast and solutionize, and that somehow that makes them look good. Yes, I know how to handle this. I'm clever. Really, and we used the word empathy. I had a brief discussion about that, but also humility. Actually saying, do you know what I don't know? And that's just as important. So for all these sorts of reasons, we seem to be we seem to find it very intuitive to make a bad decision. And we fear that somehow our identity and our leadership quality will go down if we hesitate for a moment. So that's why I called that chapter how to make a poor decision, because there's so many poor decisions. And as I say, it's often the lack of realization that we are designing all the time, just without consideration of who for, and kind of accidentally not joining the whole thing up and thinking it'll magically go right. And if it doesn't, marketing will just put out some more advertising and then it'll be fine. Come on, we can do better than that.
Absolutely. And I guess that then I do quite a lot of behavioural profiling with teams. So actually some of the stuff that you talk about there in terms of acting faster or owning it or doing the decisions, it's going to be a lot easier for some people than it is for others.
Yes, and actually you just reminded me, there was, again, in the social housing space, there was a company that for very good reason made the decision they wanted to go to carbon zero, and so they took everyone's boilers out and put heat pumps in, only for those people's electricity bills to go up 2.5 times, and it forced them to stop eating. So again, it felt like a good decision, but they hadn't thought the consequences through. They hadn't talked to people about, they hadn't modelled those future scenarios, because just maybe they might have then understood that, hang on, let's just press pause here. let's understand. But they made a big, brave decision, felt like the right thing to do, and they had to put all the gas boilers back. Can you imagine that? That was expensive.
Absolutely. Right, this is the moment where I turn the spotlight on you. Actually, you've had quite a lot of experience on leading people through a design agency or consultancy or education. But I'm quite interested in any mistakes that you've made, because part of this is about the benefit of hindsight. So what can you share with us, that a mistake that perhaps you've made that others could avoid?
It's that classic interview question, isn't it? Tell us we had a failure. I mean, I think there are some general things, certainly when I look back on my younger career, because I've always been, for me, what I talk about has always been obvious, but of course for no one else it is. And I would definitely say, and this perhaps is focused at designers, but anybody who's trying to change things, trying to transform things, and in a way it comes back to empathy, but having empathy for the person that doesn't understand what you're talking about, that is uncomfortable with change. I've been called a chocolate teapot and stuff like that loads of times. And perhaps I just fought that. But I think putting yourself in other people's shoes is fundamental to thinking about your customers, but it's also fundamental to think about other leaders or other people that you might be managing, and taking them on the journey. And I think one of the things I always try and do is make sure that I try and make sure that they really understand what we're doing, because if they don't, we can have failures. Absolutely. Most failures are people going off piste, people saying this is rubbish, I haven't talked to them enough, I haven't explained what we're doing, I haven't, given them the intellectual hug, as it were, of service design to make sure they really get it. And the minute you're out of the room, they say, "Oh, that was a load of rubbish, wasn't it?" And they carry on. So
that's interesting. Yeah,
being aware and being there when you're not there, if you like, I think is one thing I wasn't always good at, and just assumed people got it. But I realised I had a boss who said, it's like a toddler, Clive. You've got to tell them 13 times before they understand what you're actually saying. And actually, I thought that was quite good advice. I'm sure there's more serious failures I've had. I think often failures aren't your own fault. I've designed brilliant things that then gotten developed, and they did things like minimum viable product, which means it's viable for what they can make, but it's not viable for what customers want. And so you get huge failures. I was, designing Smart Investor for Barclays Bank, and I don't think it's a big secret because FT did a 45-minute podcast on how terrible it was a few years ago. And, it was brilliantly designed, but it wasn't brilliantly delivered because, maybe it wasn't my fault, but maybe I should have intervened more and checked that they were going to build something. And sometimes you have to be confrontational, frankly. There are different cultures in development houses where they're given a lot more freedom and they don't want namby-pamby designers around. It's back to collaboration. We have to understand each other better or you will get failure. And that's happened to me.
So what do you know? I don't know. Let's think about the hardest group of people that you've ever worked with. This doesn't have to be a mistake, but you know, maybe they're thinking, oh, we've
Right.
got this mamby-pamby designer come in. How do you work with them? How do you get them on board?
We try. I say we. My team and I have been in various teams. I've been in that situation. I mean, I worked for a bank for 5 years. There were 98% of the people in the bank were trying to stop me and get me fired. So people in data, people in digital development are often really don't want you there, or they say they know it all already. And maybe they do, but it's lower priority. Whereas for me, it's number one priority. I tried a few tricks in the past and various different things works, but I'll tell you one of the things that I really noticed works is that when I run like a creativity session, okay, we've got a problem to solve. You think I'm an idiot, people. So I go through a few things and I often say, just imagine you work for your competitor. It's always unbelievable how creative people who hate me suddenly become. I've somehow given them permission to think differently to how they do in their day job, where they can be quite cynical. They'll be saying,
Okay.
if
No, I
I do
like that.
this,
Yeah.
my boss will laugh at me. My colleagues will laugh at me. There's a lot of self-repression goes on in those sorts of teams. And, they're nervous of looking stupid. Whereas I go into creativity session, don't judge, no judgment. You can think what you want. So if I say, pretend you're working for your competitor, they suddenly become creative. And they suddenly get on board, and it's usually an epiphany moment, and they go, okay, I see what you're doing. So there's tricks like that.
That's a great. I will be stealing that tip
Please
with
with
pride.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing. You touched on it earlier on. Empathy. I read this is probably going to be the outtake that you were the director of Project Love.
Yes.
What
What's
all that? That needs to be overdubbed in like a sort of Barry White tone. What's all that about?
Right. That's a great one. Should have done that. So it's a really interesting project. It's perhaps its name is somewhat misleading, but it is about love. It absolutely is. It was I was approached after I left the Royal College of Art about a year and a half, 2 years ago, by an American organisation who were very interested in how do we. The word they used was love each other more, and they were looking at how has society become so toxic, how has everything become so transactional. Why do we like each other more? Everyone's fighting each other politically, migration, whatever it might be. And they said, they had worked with philosophers and writers, and they said, could designers do something that would help people be a little bit more reasonable, actually? But they called it love. And so I sat down and they had a sort of marvelous philosopher writer who'd been working with them. And we said, well, what is love? And we created a spectrum that started off with actually understanding yourself. And then, of course, we have relational love. But actually, we decided that Taylor Swift and Shakespeare had kind of done that. we weren't going to be too focused on love in the Barry White way or the Taylor Swift way. So having said that, the very first student I lectured at the Royal College of Art when I started tutoring there has created an app called Lovewick, which is about keeping relationships together. So she had designed something for loving relationships that is actually very, very successful, and you can find it on the App Store and things like that. She would make you sort of dance around the kitchen with your partner when you got home from work and things like that. It's really, really great. Now AI. It used to be just her typing messages. People thought it was AI, but it was just her. Right. Anyway, I digress. But then we looked at communities, multicultural, all over the world, how communities like each other or hate each other. We try to understand what are the things that are happening where people are more tolerant of their neighborhood, their neighbors and community. And I was actually inspired by flipping Coronation. When my whole street had a party, I got to know everyone that I'd been walking past for the last 20 years and didn't know. Unbelievable diversity. And we had a great day. I thought, well, that's a designed intervention. Thank you, King Charles.
Thank you, yeah.
Close your street and have a party. You end up loving each other more. Looked at society. One of the projects that came out of it was a refugee football team playing local residents in Brighton to break down the barriers between the hatred of the refugees who'd come into the country from horrible war-torn places, And we came up actually with 16. We looked at nature. Lots of projects around actually just relaxing and loving our planet and reflecting on ourselves. It got bit spiritual at times. I learned a lot from the project. 16 projects, and you can see them on a website actually called www.theprojectlove. Turns out there's lots of Project Loves out there, but theprojectlove.com.
Get that right. Get that right.
Yeah.
We'll drop that below.
It's probably still bewildering, but there's 16 attempts there. There's an AI tool that measures your emails and social media and gives you a kindness score. There's stuff
That's
around.
Interesting. That's interesting. Leaders, check out your kindness score.
No, exactly. Yeah. There's park benches that help people, get over loneliness and talk to each other. There's all sorts of interesting stuff. It was like an experiment, but I think we had a couple of exhibitions. Had one about 6 months ago at London Design Festival, hundreds of people coming in. And unfortunately, then the funding stopped. So I'm just about to launch another cohort. I'm opening up to professional designers and design graduates. It was mostly recent design graduates from my course who worked on the first one. We're opening it up. We're hoping to get another load of designers. We'll have an exhibition in 12 months' time and show. And, the funny thing that happened was that people would come to the exhibition because they were interested in the context and the content. And then they saw the stuff there and said, oh, that's design. So, yeah, that's it, right? So the only way you can really explain design is to show an example of it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I mean, we could probably talk for another hour on that, but we won't. I'll ask you my closing question, which is a fairly consistent one, and that is what book or resource would you recommend to fellow leaders out there?
I find Lou Downe wrote a book called Good Services, and it's she was sort of the second head of government digital services after the initial team revolutionized government and took away all the branding of all the different government departments and gave them one gov.uk. It was a massive thing and it's been much copied worldwide. Lou Downe went on to lead government digital services, and she's written this book, Good Services, and I do think it's a wonderfully practical, simple, understandable book, a rallying cry for doing good services. So it's quite public sector orientated, but not exclusively so, and I think it's a good, passionate description of why we do what we do.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Clive, for joining us, and good luck with your book launch.
My pleasure. Thanks, James.